when the body moves without asking. There is a kind of discipline that no longer announces itself. It doesn't tense the jaw or summon courage. It happens before thought. The alarm sounds. Your feet touch the floor. Cold air fills the lungs. The room is still dark. No inner speech rises to argue. The body is already standing, and that quiet fact unsettles people who watch you live this way. Most people treat discipline like a visitor. They invite it in when they feel ready. They ask it to wait when the mood is wrong. You see this at work, at training halls, at kitchen tables before dawn. Plans are made loudly. Then mornings arrive. Shoulders tighten. The phone glows. Someone says they'll start tomorrow, and everyone nods because they recognize the ritual of delay. The failure is not effort. It is identity. When discipline depends on feeling, it dissolves under friction. A long night. A slight fever. A comment from someone close, "You don't have to be so rigid." The words land. The chest tightens. Many people fold there, because they are still deciding who they are allowed to be. Older paths understood something colder. Monks rose before the bell not from virtue, but because staying down felt wrong. Warriors trained in rain because the body had learned no alternative. Not heroic. Just ordinary. If this description irritates you, stay. If it feels familiar, stay longer. But before you go on, name the habit you keep renegotiating with yourself. Write it down. No explanation. Just the fact, the quiet hour that reveals who you are. He looks like everyone else from the outside. Same commute. Same responsibilities. Same excuses available if he wanted them. But there is an hour each morning that exposes the difference. Not because it is impressive, but because it is dull. The room is cold. Fingers are stiff as they lace shoes the same way every day. Breath fogs once, then steadies. No music. No ritual talk. Just the body moving because it has learned this hour belongs to it. He used to be motivated. That phase left scars. Back then, mornings were negotiations. He would sit on the edge of the bed, shoulders slumped, scrolling for permission to delay. Some days he won. Most days the phone did. People around him sounded the same then, full of plans, short on continuity. They encouraged him when he talked about starting again. Encouragement is cheap. It costs nothing and asks for nothing in return. Now, there is no audience. Knees bend. The floor is cold. The belt is tied before the mind starts forming sentences. Muscles ache in familiar places, a dull ache in the legs, heat behind the eyes. The body does not ask if today matters. It assumes it does. That assumption is where the change began, though he didn't notice it at the time. At work, this shows up sideways. He arrives early without comment. When a task repeats, he does it the same way, even when others improvise to stay interested. Someone laughs and calls him rigid. The word is meant lightly, but it lands. He feels it in the chest, a brief tightening, then nothing. He keeps moving. The discomfort passes faster now. Social friction used to shake him. Now it barely registers before the next action starts. This is how discipline stops feeling like effort. It becomes expectation. When he misses a session, travel, illness, the absence irritates him more than the training ever did. His body feels misaligned, like a step skipped on stairs. He adjusts immediately. Not heroically. Just practically. The chain matters more than intensity. Others notice the predictability. Invitations change. Some stop asking him out late. A few assume he's judging them. He isn't. But his routine exposes choices they're still debating, and that exposure makes people uneasy. Consistency does that. It reflects without speaking. The strange part is how little he thinks about it now. No slogans. No internal speeches. Just repetition done long enough that choice fell away. And when choice disappears, something else appears in its place, an identity that doesn't wait for permission. That quiet hour keeps coming. The body will answer it tomorrow. The question is whether the mind will keep trying to interfere. The quiet hour that reveals who you are. He looks like everyone else from the outside. Same commute. Same responsibilities. Same excuses available if he wanted them. But there is an hour each morning that exposes the difference. Not because it is impressive, but because it is dull. The room is cold. Fingers are stiff as they lace shoes the same way every day. Breath fogs once, then steadies. No music. No ritual talk. Just the body moving because it has learned this hour belongs to it. He used to be motivated. That phase left scars. Back then, mornings were negotiations. He would sit on the edge of the bed, shoulders slumped, scrolling for permission to delay. Some days he won. Most days the phone did. People around him sounded the same then, full of plans, short on continuity. They encouraged him when he talked about starting again. Encouragement is cheap. It costs nothing and asks for nothing in return. Now, there is no audience. Knees bend. The floor is cold. The belt is tied before the mind starts forming sentences. Muscles ache in familiar places, a dull ache in the legs, heat behind the eyes. The body does not ask if today matters. It assumes it does. That assumption is where the change began, though he didn't notice it at the time. At work, this shows up sideways. He arrives early without comment. When a task repeats, he does it the same way, even when others improvise to stay interested. Someone laughs and calls him rigid. The word is meant lightly, but it lands. He feels it in the chest, a brief tightening, then nothing. He keeps moving. The discomfort passes faster now. Social friction used to shake him. Now it barely registers before the next action starts. This is how discipline stops feeling like effort. It becomes expectation. When he misses a session, travel, illness, the absence irritates him more than the training ever did. His body feels misaligned, like a step skipped on stairs. He adjusts immediately. Not heroically. Just practically. The chain matters more than intensity. Others notice the predictability. Invitations change. Some stop asking him out late. A few assume he's judging them. He isn't. But his routine exposes choices they're still debating, and that exposure makes people uneasy. Consistency does that. It reflects without speaking. The strange part is how little he thinks about it now. No slogans. No internal speeches. Just repetition done long enough that choice fell away. And when choice disappears, something else appears in its place, an identity that doesn't wait for permission. That quiet hour keeps coming. The body will answer it tomorrow. The question is whether the mind will keep trying to interfere. The body learns faster than the mind. Change didn't arrive as clarity. It arrived as sensation. The body began to move before the thought finished forming. He noticed it one morning when exhaustion sat heavy behind the eyes. Sleep had been thin. The room smelled stale. He expected resistance. Instead, his legs swung off the bed on their own. Feet found the floor. Cold traveled up through the soles. By the time the mind caught up, the body was already committed. This unsettled him more than failure ever had. It felt like losing control, though it was the opposite. The body had learned a sequence and now protected it. When he tried to pause, just to test it, there was a brief discomfort, a tight band across the chest, like holding breath too long. Stopping felt wrong. Continuing felt neutral. That inversion stayed with him. Training followed the same pattern. Hands wrapped the handle the same way. Grip adjusted without inspection. The dull ache in the shoulders arrived on schedule, then faded. Others around him stretched, talked, delayed starting. He felt their eyes occasionally. Someone asked why he never skipped warm-ups. He shrugged. The answer wasn't accessible anymore. It lived below language. At work, this bodily memory started to leak into other hours. When a task appeared, his hands moved before the internal debate could assemble. Keyboard clicks replaced hesitation. Mistakes happened, were corrected, and left no residue. Colleagues commented on speed, on focus. One joked that he was becoming mechanical. The word carried a warning. He felt it, then let it pass. Machines don't negotiate. That was the point. The mind resisted this shift quietly. It missed being consulted. On slower days, it tried to reclaim ground. During breaks, it whispered about balance, about flexibility. He felt the pull as a slight slackening in posture, a heaviness in the arms. Instead of answering, he adjusted his stance. Spine straightened. Breath dropped lower. The whisper faded when ignored. Social spaces became more complex. Friends noticed he left earlier, arrived earlier, declined without elaboration. Invitations thinned. A few tested him with sarcasm. "What happens if you miss one day?" they asked. He felt the question land in the gut. The answer was simple, but not shareable. Missing wasn't catastrophic. Lingering in choice was. He smiled and changed the subject. What surprised him most was how little pride was involved. There was no surge of confidence, no narrative of improvement. Just alignment. When routine held, the body felt settled. When it broke, even briefly, something felt off, like walking with a stone in the shoe. The correction came quickly now. No drama. No guilt. Just return. This is where discipline stops being visible. Outsiders see behavior. They miss the deeper shift, the body enforcing a standard the mind once failed to keep. When that happens, effort becomes irrelevant. What remains is expectation, carried quietly in muscle and breath. And expectations, once set, are difficult to argue with, removing choice until only movement remains. The turning point was not intensity. It was subtraction. He began removing moments where choice could appear. Shoes placed by the door the night before. Training time fixed without flexibility. The order of actions locked in place. When morning came, there was nothing to decide. The body followed a narrow path, and narrow paths leave no room for wandering. The first days felt strange. Not harder, emptier. The mind searched for options and found none. It reacted with irritation. Jaw tightened. Breath shortened. He noticed the tension while pouring water, while tightening the belt, while stepping outside into the cold air. The irritation passed once movement began. It always did. Motion burned it off like frost under sunlight. Others lived differently. He saw it clearly now. Coworkers arrived debating priorities, rearranging schedules, negotiating energy. Meetings drifted. Tasks expanded to fill indecision. He felt the contrast physically. His shoulders stayed low. Pulse steady. When instructions came, he executed without commentary. This made some people uncomfortable. One asked why he never asked questions anymore. He answered when clarification mattered. He did not ask for reassurance. In training spaces, the difference sharpened. Weather shifted. Rain hammered the roof. Some stayed home. He adjusted location and continued. The adjustment happened automatically, like turning when a hallway ends. No frustration. No narrative about resilience. Just continuation. The body accepted the rule faster than the mind ever had. Choice had been the weak point all along. When choice existed, negotiation followed. When negotiation followed, delay crept in. Removing choice collapsed the entire sequence. He didn't feel stronger. He felt quieter. That quiet unsettled people who relied on mood to signal action. They mistook silence for severity. Social pressure increased subtly. Friends suggested spontaneity. Managers praised flexibility. He felt the pull as a slight sway, a temptation to prove he could bend. The body responded first again, a tightening in the lower back, a pause in breath. He recognized the signal and returned to sequence. The sway stopped. What surprised him was how humane this felt. Without daily decisions, mental noise dropped. Fatigue lessened. The body conserved energy once wasted on argument. Even mistakes felt lighter. When something broke the schedule, he didn't spiral. He simply resumed at the next fixed point. The chain mattered more than the link. This is where discipline hardened into structure. Not a system to manage, but a rail to move along. Rails don't motivate trains. They constrain them, and in that constraint, movement becomes inevitable. People still asked how he stayed consistent. He no longer tried to answer. The explanation required a world where choice was central. He no longer lived there. The rail was set. Tomorrow would arrive. His body already knew where to go. Continuity survives what perfection cannot. He learned this lesson on a day that went wrong early. The body felt off. Throat dry. Legs heavy, as if sand had settled in the joints overnight. Sleep had been broken by noise, by heat, by thoughts that refused to line up. In the past, this would have been enough to justify stopping. Not quitting, just postponing. The most dangerous word. Instead, he shortened the distance. Reduced the weight. Slowed the pace. The action remained. Knees bent. Breath moved in and out, shallow at first, then deeper. The floor was still cold. The routine still existed. What changed was scale, not presence. That distinction mattered more than intensity ever had. Perfection had always demanded mood. It wanted ideal conditions. Silence. Energy. A clean start. Continuity asked for none of that. It only required that the chain remain unbroken. Even thin links held weight if they stayed connected. He felt this physically, less strain, less pressure. The body accepted the lighter load without protest. Others misunderstood this adjustment. At training, someone commented that he was taking it easy. The words carried judgment. He felt a brief heat behind the eyes, then nothing. He finished and left. Explanation would have been a form of seeking approval, and approval had no role here. The standard was internal now, enforced by repetition, not opinion. This approach bled into the rest of his life. On days when work dragged, he completed fewer tasks, but he started them on time. When illness crept in, he showed up briefly, then rested. The presence mattered. Absence created questions. Presence closed them. The body recognized the difference immediately. There were still moments of temptation. A voice suggested that partial effort diluted the point. He felt that suggestion as a tightening in the shoulders, a desire to either go all in or not at all. Extremes are comforting. They remove ambiguity. Continuity lived in the uncomfortable middle. He stayed there, letting the tension burn off through motion. Social friction sharpened here. People praised hard pushes and dramatic rest days. Quiet consistency drew less applause. Some mistook it for lack of ambition. Others tried to test him, skipping days to see if he'd follow. He didn't. Predictability became his boundary. It was unspoken, but it held. What changed most was recovery. Without cycles of overreach and collapse, the body stabilized. Pulse steadied faster. Sleep deepened. The dull aches became familiar instead of alarming. The routine stopped feeling like a demand and started feeling like alignment. Not pleasure. Not pride. Just rightness. Continuity doesn't impress. It endures. And endurance reshapes identity in ways bursts of effort never can. He felt that shift quietly, in how quickly he returned after disruption, in how little emotion the return required. The chain held. That was enough. When obstacles appear, the body already knows. The interruption arrived without warning. A late call. A shifted schedule. The kind of disruption people use as proof that consistency is fragile. He felt it in the body first, a slight jolt in the stomach, shoulders tightening as plans collapsed. The mind reached for solutions, for explanations, for permission to skip. It found none. The response had been set long before this moment. When time compressed, the session shortened. When space disappeared, movement relocated. No evaluation of fairness. No irritation held long enough to harden. He adjusted and moved. The adjustment took seconds. That speed mattered more than the action itself. He noticed how others reacted under the same pressure. Meetings ran late and routines dissolved. People grew sharp, defensive, verbose. They explained themselves repeatedly, as if words could replace structure. He felt the contrast physically. His breath stayed low. Movements economical. The body had rehearsed this scenario enough times that novelty no longer shook it. This wasn't flexibility. It was pre-decision. When rain came, training moved indoors. When injury flared, intensity dropped but time remained fixed. When travel interfered, the smallest possible action filled the space. These rules lived in muscle memory now. They didn't require courage. They required execution. Social friction sharpened again. Someone asked why he was so strict with himself. The question carried concern, maybe envy. He felt it as pressure behind the sternum, a pull toward reassurance. He let the feeling pass and answered plainly. This is how it works. The conversation ended sooner than expected. Clarity often does that. What surprised him was how obstacles lost their emotional weight. They still existed. They still demanded response. But they no longer carried drama. Drama requires choice. Without it, obstacles become logistics. Logistics are solved, not argued with. The body prefers that simplicity. There were moments when the system was tested hard. Illness forced stillness. Travel erased familiar cues. On those days, the smallest action became sacred. A brief stretch. A walk. One controlled breath cycle. The body accepted these as placeholders, keeping the rhythm alive. Rhythm mattered more than performance. Others misunderstood this minimalism. They equated small actions with weakness. He felt the judgment as a tightening in the jaw, then release. Their standards were not his. He had learned that discipline collapses not under pressure, but under inconsistency. Protecting the sequence was the real work. Over time, these preset responses reduced anxiety. The future felt less threatening when it no longer required improvisation. The body trusted the system. Trust quiets the nervous system faster than reassurance ever could. Sleep came easier after disruptions. Recovery shortened. This is where discipline becomes resilient. Not rigid, but inevitable. When obstacles appear, the response arrives with them. No pause. No debate. Just motion continuing along a path already worn smooth. And smooth paths carry you forward, even when the terrain turns rough, the moment others begin to feel uncomfortable. The shift became visible the day someone commented on it out loud. Not praise. Not criticism. An observation delivered sideways. "You're always the same," they said, half smiling, as if sameness were a flaw. He felt the words land in the body first, a brief tightening across the shoulders, heat rising to the neck. The reaction passed. The routine did not. Predictability unsettles people who rely on flexibility to protect themselves. His presence highlighted patterns they preferred to keep soft. He arrived when expected. Left when planned. Declined invitations without explanation. There was no edge to it, no moral stance. Just sequence. That absence of drama made it harder to argue with. At work, this consistency created quiet distance. Colleagues stopped testing deadlines with him. Requests became cleaner. Fewer apologies preceded conversations. Some avoided him altogether, sensing that he wouldn't absorb their indecision. He noticed the social shift without naming it. The body registered it as less noise, fewer interruptions. Space opened where chaos used to sit. Friends reacted differently. A few adjusted, meeting him earlier, planning around his fixed points. Others faded. They joked less, texted less. Predictability is only welcomed by those ready to meet it. The rest feel judged by it, even when no judgment exists. He felt the loss as a dull ache, low in the chest, then movement carried it away. The most telling moments were unspoken. When plans changed suddenly, eyes flicked toward him, waiting for resistance. It never came. He adapted within his rails and continued. That calm response disrupted the emotional economy of the room. Drama needs participants. He no longer volunteered. Internally, something locked. Not pride. Not confidence. A quiet refusal to renegotiate standards already paid for. The body felt heavier in a good way, grounded. Posture settled. Breath slowed. Even fatigue felt cleaner, less tangled with guilt or doubt. When rest came, it was taken fully, without justification. This is where discipline stops being impressive and starts being inconvenient to others. It no longer seeks approval. It doesn't explain itself. It simply exists, and existence at that level creates friction. He accepted the friction as proof of alignment, not superiority. Alignment has weight. Weight presses outward. There were still moments of temptation. A desire to smooth edges, to reassure people he was still flexible, still easy. He felt it as a softening in the spine, a slight lean toward accommodation. He corrected posture. The urge passed. The sequence held. Transformation did not announce itself with victory. It revealed itself through discomfort, others, not his. When people grow uneasy around your consistency, it means your standards have stopped orbiting their expectations. The body knew this before the mind did. It moved forward anyway, when discipline stops asking who you are. At some point, the question disappears. Not because it was answered, but because it no longer matters. Discipline is no longer something you apply to your life. It is the shape your life takes. The body wakes when it should. Moves when it must. Rests without guilt. There is no internal debate left to win. This is what most people misunderstand. They think discipline is an action repeated daily. Something fragile, always at risk of breaking. But what endures is not action. It is identity. When discipline becomes default, effort fades into the background. What remains is expectation, quiet, firm, unyielding. The strongest person is rarely the loudest. It is the one who no longer negotiates with fatigue, mood, or opinion. The one whose standards were paid for slowly and are now protected automatically. The one whose body moves before excuses can assemble. Others may still comment, still joke, still test the edges. Let them. Discipline at this level does not defend itself. It does not persuade. It simply continues, and continuation is more convincing than any explanation. If you are still waiting to feel ready, you already know where that path leads. Read your own history. It is consistent in its outcomes. The alternative is not motivation. It is removal, of choice, of drama, of internal bargaining. Discipline is not something you do every day. It is something you become, and once you become it, leaving feels wrong. If this exposed something you've been avoiding, mark it publicly. One sentence. One commitment. No context. No justification. Let your words bind you, or don't write them at all.